Relationships. We've all been in them, some better than others, but they play a crucial part in building healthcare systems that serve and save. Now, these relationships mean very little if they're not built on compassion, understanding, empathy, and knowledge. A recent study was conducted at Stanford University that looked at the placebo effect in relation to a physician's demeanor. The study discovered that if a physician's demeanor was seen as warm and confident, the placebo effect was enhanced. Conversely, if it was seen as warm or confident, but not both, it was lessened. Now, this finding is fascinating and important because it says two things. One, that as caregivers, knowledge is not enough. That human element must be taken into consideration. Also, it speaks our patients need, as caregivers, we want them to be knowledgeable because it provides a feeling of safety. Also, another thing is cystic fibrosis. This is a term some of you may have heard, some of you may not. But what is it? Well, it's a genetic lung disease that is progressive that primarily affects the lungs, pancreas, and stomach. However, what they don't tell you when you sign up for this disease is that it can affect everything else. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself because I know what you're all thinking. Who is this dashing and debonair young man you see before you? Go ahead, take a second, drink it in. That's right, that's right. Well, let's start at the beginning. I am Nicholas Kelly, and I was born March 16, 1987, and I was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis when I was 3 months old. That's not uncommon. I was very sick as a child. That's also not uncommon. However, as I continued to get sicker, no one would test me for the disease because 32 years ago, they didn't believe African Americans could have this disease. So as I continued to get sicker, it was actually my mother who learned the symptoms, did the research, and she just diagnosed me with this disease. She was persistent. She demanded I get tested. And what my mother wants, my mother gets. If you don't believe me, ask my father. Understand, I was too young to understand the ramifications of these doctors' refusal to test me, but my mother's relentlessness and ferocity for knowledge and my care is a thing that will resonate throughout my talk and throughout my life. Because understand, there is no worse feeling than not being heard when no one is even trying to listen. When I was 5 years old, I had major heart surgery. I remember sitting in the car with my twin sister, my mom going to me and saying, "Son, you're gonna be in the hospital for a long time, but while in there, you're gonna live like a king." I was in the hospital for over 6 months, but not one day was I alone. This is important because from a very young age, the hospital has been a huge portion of my life. So despite the diagnosis and the disease and surgeries, I never realized until I was older that I had any type of disease or sickness. Yes, I understand I had to take medicines and treatments, but they were always incorporated into my normal life. It was just something I had to do. And understand, in addition to CF, I have liver disease, kidney disease, diabetes, and 18 food allergies, and that's just to name a few. I know, I got all the cool diseases. That's what you're thinking. But I was never treated differently because of these ailments. I was held to the same expectations, I had the same standards, and I had the same opportunities. This culture that was created where my disease did not define me. The only limitations were the ones that I placed upon myself. In my early teen years, I spent most of it in pain, in GI discomfort, or in some type of GI distress. All this came to head when I was 14 years old, when I had 15 endoscopy procedures in the span of 6 months. I saw specialist after specialist, all confused because no one knew what was wrong with me. Until I saw one doctor who decided she was going to take a different approach. And she said, we're going to admit you to the hospital a couple days and get a formal clean out, and maybe we can have some results. I was in the hospital for 7 days getting pricked and probed everywhere imaginable. The only thing that made it okay is that I had people there with me. On day 3, one of my doctors came in, a part of my care team, to interview me. My mom's sitting there, and his interview felt distant, disengaged. He even walked out during part of it. When he walked out, I remember my chart sitting in the corner. I looked at my mom and said, hey mom, can I read that? Because I had never been compelled to read my chart before. That was like forbidden fruit to me. But for some reason that day, I wanted to see what he wrote. So I grabbed my chart, I opened it, and in it I'm expecting to see the signs and symptoms I just told him. But what would I read in that chart would forever change how I looked at my healthcare and how I looked at my practitioners. Because this is what I did read. I do not believe Nicholas is in pain. I believe he's a hypochondriac. And this is all an elaborate ploy for attention. Validated by the fact he has been in the hospital for several days and has had no visitors. I was crushed. The fact that someone a part of my care did not believe me was absolutely demoralizing. Especially when you consider that I have a disease that fluctuates temperament like Cleveland fluctuates weather. It left me with so many questions. Understand, for me, it was my doctor. But for you, it could be your boss. For you, it could be your teacher. The idea of being powerless or simply being voiceless for no other reason than you're the person saying it. Full disclosure, some of my faith was restored when the doctor who wanted to take a different approach was able to find something from that different approach. But understand, that faith restored does not even come close to comparing to the damage that was done in what I read in that chart. One of the things, my first grown-up job, I was a home health dietitian. I saw a lot of patients, none more memorable than patient X. He was a 50-year-old Caucasian male. He had been on our services for a long time. He was labeled non-compliant and not looking to change. So my boss comes to me one day and goes, hey Nick, I need you to go see this patient. He's not compliant, he's not gonna change. I just need you to go see him so you can fail, and then we can get him off our services. I looked at her, I go, first off, Nick, don't fail. Secondly, excuse me? I couldn't believe the statement she had said to me. So needless to say, I went to go see him. Within the first hour, he was not only enthused, he was engaged at the opportunity of change. You know, what these other clinicians failed to realize is he didn't lack desire, he lacked understanding. And because he lacked understanding, he lacked follow-through. So what I did is I removed the non-compliant label. I treated him like a blank slate, and I assessed him where he was. And I started from scratch and re-educated him. Within a month of seeing this patient, I was able to get his average blood sugars down from 319 to 189, and his subsequent A1C down from 10.7 to 8.8. This man became the company-wide example for not to use the non-compliant label and why we need to have unity across all levels of care. As a speaker, I get asked this question all the time. They go, Nick, how do I get my patient to be more compliant and take their meds? Now, these questions might seem simple enough, but it always comes from two areas. Either A, they don't know why the patient isn't taking the med, or they don't understand or they trivialize the reason. This is what I call the healthy person's mind state. Let me explain. So, say you in the front row, we'll call you Sporty. So Sporty, you're having a fantastic day. It's amazing, woo, party! It's a 9 out of a 10. And then, we'll say that day goes to a 10 out of a 10. Are you gonna tell the difference? Probably not. Now, we'll say me. I'm a person in chronic pain or chronic illness. Most of my days are 4 out of 10, and I'm not taking my medicine for whatever reason. And then you come to me and go, Nick, if you don't take your meds, you're not going to feel well. So me not feeling well is going to take my 4 out of 10 to a 3 out of 10. Am I going to tell the difference? Probably not. However, what you did is you approached me from your mind state, because most of your days are 7 out of 10s. And if you didn't take that same medicine, you would go to a 3 out of a 10. And that right there is that healthy person mind state. And until us as clinicians can understand that mind state and then start providing solutions to our patients where they are and not based on our own bias or where we think they should be at, we will forever have a gap. Conversely, patients, they always come to me and go, why does it take so long to see my doctor? What do they do? Are they even working? This right here speaks to a fundamental disconnect for the healthcare system or the lack of what it takes to be a clinician. I'll give you an example. So a patient knows they're supposed to see their doctor at 11:30. What they don't understand is in that time, they're scheduled to see 6 other clinicians, all requiring 10 minutes each. Of those, 3 other patients need to be seen requiring 10 minutes each. So an 11:30 start time is a 1:30 end time. They also don't see the social worker on the phone for 3 hours trying to get prior authorization for one med, or the dietitian at home until 8 o'clock at night searching alternative therapies. So they never get a full understanding of the job it takes to be a clinician. And as long as that fundamental gap exists, there will be understanding and a gap there. What this begs to differ is realizing there's people working these jobs, and we must treat them as humans and not labels. Because the human element is the most important part of this entire conversation. Why? Because healthcare, disease, and change start and end with people. Attitudes. We talk about them, but how do they affect the people? We've all been in place. You go into work, your favorite coffee spot, your favorite diner, and someone has a bad attitude. And his or her attitude, it permeates throughout the workplace, throughout the office. It doesn't just affect them, it affects everyone around them. And now if you apply that to patients, that can make a patient weary to ask for assistance, overly cognitive of care, or it can make them reluctant to seek advice or support for someone who could be an advocate for them. And that last part is super important, especially with someone dealing with anything chronic disease, anything, because someone who can relate to what you're going through and who can be an advocate for you is a huge portion. And in my life, that sentiment has extremely been echoed, because some of the people I've met in relation to this disease has been some of the greatest of my lifetime. Now, through this talk, I've given you gaps to show between the clinician patient and the human experience. But what can we do to combat them? The first is we need to understand, before a distinction can be made, clinician, patient, boss, worker, student, teacher, they're simply people at these positions, and we should be treated as such. Second, everyone has different beliefs. We come from different cultures and different backgrounds. And for us to respect that, we must identify that before a bridge can be gapped, before the gap can be bridged. Third, understand, we must have open dialogue. No one wants to feel like a bystander or an observer in his or her own life or care. We need to start having these conversations with each other. And with those conversations, we can share. Understand, when we give advice, we should give expertise without bias. Take responsibility for our personal selves. And give expectations of what we want. As far as our clinicians go, remember, no matter how much, as patients, remember, no matter how much your clinicians care for you, it is your responsibility to tell them what is and is not working. As you are in control, because you are the linchpin, because at the end of the day, it is your health. the thing that is important to remember, and the thing that is most understanding and most understated is this, as that when it comes down to these elements, it's all about the conversation. I'm not telling you that these conversations are going to be simple, but it is your responsibility, because this applies to everyone. It is your responsibility to stand up and speak up for what you want and what you're willing to do. Because understand, nothing great was ever accomplished in your comfort zone. And outside of my comfort zone, I have been able to thrive despite my disease. I've become a registered and licensed dietitian with my master's in food nutrition. I've also become a professional dancer, photographer, poet, entrepreneur, fashion designer. I'm also a patient advocate, a cystic fibrosis fighter, and now a TEDx speaker. With that, I'm Nicholas Kelly, thank you. And remember, we are nothing without the help and support of each other.